My nanny taught my daughter to call her mama and me by my first name. I hired Renee when my daughter Olive was 6 months old. I had to go back to work after maternity leave and I needed someone I could trust. Renee came with excellent references and 15 years of experience. She seemed warm and capable, and Olive took to her immediately. I thought I had found the perfect situation. The first year went smoothly. Renee sent me photos throughout the day. She kept detailed notes about naps and feedings. She followed my instructions about routines and schedules. She seemed to genuinely care about Olive, and I was grateful to have her. I paid her well above market rate because I wanted her to stay. I gave her paid holidays and sick days. I bought her birthday gifts and Christmas bonuses. I treated her like family because she was helping me raise my child. Things started to change when Olive began talking. Her first word was Dada, which made my husband cry with happiness. Her second word was supposed to be Mama. I waited for it. I practiced with her every night when I came home from work. I would point to myself and say Mama over and over, hoping she would repeat it. She never did. Instead, Olive's second word was Renee. I told myself it made sense. Renee was with her 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Of course, Olive would learn her name. It stung a little, but I understood. Then one Saturday morning, when Olive was about 18 months old, something happened that I will never forget. I was making breakfast and Olive was in her high chair. She looked at me and said very clearly, "Where Mama?" I smiled and said, "I am right here, baby." Olive shook her head. She pointed at the door and said, "No. Mama. Where Mama?" I asked her what she meant. She said, "Renee. Mama Renee." I felt my stomach drop. I asked Olive who I was. She looked at me and said my first name. She said it perfectly, like she had been practicing, like someone had been teaching her. I called Renee that afternoon and asked her to come over. I told her we needed to talk about something important. She arrived an hour later looking confused. I asked her directly if she had been teaching Olive to call her Mama. Renee did not deny it. She said Olive started calling her that on her own, and she did not want to correct her because it might hurt the child's feelings. She said children often called their caregivers Mama, and it was perfectly normal. She said I should not be threatened by it. I asked her why Olive called me by my first name instead of Mama. Renee hesitated. Then she said she thought it would be less confusing if Olive had different names for different people. She said since Olive already called her Mama, it made sense for me to be something else. She said she was just trying to keep things organized. I asked her if she understood that I was Olive's mother. I asked her if she understood that Mama was my title, not hers. I asked her if she understood that she had stolen something from me that I could never get back. Renee rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes at me while I was confronting her about teaching my child to call another woman mother. She said I was overreacting. She said it was just a word. She said plenty of children had multiple mother figures and there was nothing wrong with that. She said I should be grateful that Olive had someone who loved her so much. I fired her on the spot. I told her to leave her key on the counter and never come back. Renee looked shocked. She said I could not fire her over something so small. She said Olive would be devastated. She said I was being emotional and irrational. She said I would regret this when I calmed down. I did not calm down. I opened the front door and told her to leave. Renee gathered her things slowly, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. She said I would never find someone as good as her. She said Olive would forget me even more without her there to bridge the gap. She said some mothers just were not meant to be the primary attachment figure, and I should accept that. I closed the door behind her and locked it. The next few weeks were hard. Olive asked for Mama constantly, and she did not mean me. She cried at the door waiting for Renee to come back. She refused to let me comfort her. She pushed me away and screamed for the woman who had stolen my name. I took time off work. I stayed home with Olive every single day for 2 months. I read to her and sang to her and held her even when she did not want to be held. I taught her that I was Mama. I taught her that I had always been Mama. I taught her that the woman who left was someone who worked for our family and nothing more. It took time, but Olive eventually adjusted. She started calling me Mama again. She stopped asking about Renee. She let me rock her to sleep and kiss her forehead and be her mother. The bond that Renee tried to steal was rebuilt stronger than before. 6 months later, I got a call from a woman named Deborah. She said her name was Deborah and she was calling about a reference for Renee. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. I asked her to repeat that, and she said Renee had given her my number as a reference, and she wanted to ask a few questions before making her final hiring decision. I gripped the phone tighter and stared at the wall. Over a year ago, when I still trusted Renee completely, I had told her she could use me as a reference. I never thought about it again until this exact moment. Now some new mother was about to hire the same woman who stole my daughter from me, and I was the one who helped make it possible. I told Deborah this was not a phone conversation. She sounded confused and asked what I meant. I said we needed to meet in person because what I had to tell her was too important to rush through on a call. She hesitated and I could hear a baby crying in the background. She said she was pretty busy with the new baby, but maybe we could talk now for just a few minutes. I said no. I said this was serious and she needed to hear the whole story face to face. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the next afternoon, and I gave her the address before hanging up. That night I could not sleep. I kept going over what I would say to Deborah, and how I would explain what Renee did without sounding crazy or jealous. Every version I practiced in my head sounded wrong. I got up at 2 a.m. and made tea and sat at the kitchen table writing notes. My husband found me there an hour later, surrounded by crumpled paper. He asked what I was doing, and I told him about the phone call. He sat down across from me and rubbed his eyes. He said I should just tell Deborah the truth straight and not worry about how it sounded. I said the truth made me sound like a paranoid mother who could not handle her nanny bonding with her child. He reached across and squeezed my hand. He said anyone who met me would know I was reasonable, and if Deborah did not believe me, then at least I tried. I went to the coffee shop 30 minutes early the next day. I ordered a coffee I did not drink and sat at a corner table watching the door. Deborah walked in right on time carrying a baby and one of those carrier things strapped to her chest. She looked around and I waved. She came over and sat down heavily in the chair across from me. The baby was maybe 3 months old and sleeping against her chest. Deborah had dark circles under her eyes and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exactly like I remembered feeling 2 years ago. Tired and desperate and hoping that hiring the right nanny would fix everything. She thanked me for meeting her and said she really appreciated me taking the time. I nodded and asked how old her baby was. She said 3 months and 2 weeks. She said she had to go back to work in a month and she was trying to find someone she could trust. I felt my chest tighten because I knew exactly what she meant. I started talking. I told her everything about Olive and the name changing and how gradual it had been. I explained how Renee taught my daughter to call her mama and me by my first name. I described the moment in the kitchen when I realized what had happened. Deborah listened and her face went through different expressions. First confusion, then disbelief, then something harder that looked like defensiveness. She shifted in her chair and adjusted the baby carrier. She said Renee had mentioned she left her previous family because of some issues with the mother. I felt heat rise up my neck. Deborah said Renee explained that some mothers have trouble when their children bond strongly with the nanny. She said Renee told her that secure parents understand children have room for multiple attachment figures. I realized I was hearing Renee's exact words coming out of this stranger's mouth. My hands started shaking and I put them in my lap. Deborah kept talking. She said Renee had been very upfront about why she left our family, and it actually made her trust Renee more because she was honest about difficult situations. I wanted to scream. Renee had already gotten to this woman and made me into the villain before I even had a chance to tell my side. I asked Deborah if Renee had mentioned teaching Olive to use my first name instead of Mama. Deborah frowned and said no. She said Renee told her the child just naturally started calling her Mama because they spent so much time together. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I had saved videos from that time period because I knew I would need proof someday. I found the one where Olive points at the door asking for Mama and then looks at me and says my first name. I turned the phone toward Deborah. She watched the video and her expression shifted slightly but not enough. When it ended, she handed my phone back. She said children get confused about names all the time, especially when they are learning to talk. She said it did not necessarily mean anything sinister. I showed her 2 more videos. One where Olive cries for Mama Renee at bedtime. Another where she calls me by my first name while Renee stands in the background smiling. Deborah watched them both. She said she could see why I was upset, but maybe Olive was just going through a phase. She said her friend's kid called everyone Mama for like 6 months. I put my phone away. I told Deborah she was going to hire Renee anyway, and I could see that. Deborah looked uncomfortable. She said she had already made her decision before coming here, and she just wanted to hear my perspective. She said Renee came with excellent references from 4 other families, and I was the only one with a negative experience. She stood up and thanked me for my time. She said she hoped things were better with my daughter now. Then she left. I sat there for another hour staring at my cold coffee. I had failed. Another mother was going to lose precious time with her baby, and I could not stop it. When I got home, my husband asked how it went. I told him Deborah did not believe me. He said I did what I could, but I could not save everyone from their own choices. That night, I lay awake thinking about Renee working with another family. I thought about all the other families she had worked for over 15 years. I got up and went to my office where I had kept all of Renee's paperwork from when I hired her. I found her reference list with 5 names and phone numbers. I recognized Deborah's name at the bottom where she must have added it recently. I looked at the other 4 names. I decided to call them. The first number was disconnected. The second went to voicemail, and I left a message that was never returned. The third was Harvey Sanderson, and he answered on the second ring. I introduced myself and said I was calling about Renee, who used to work for me. There was a long silence. Then Harvey asked in a careful voice what Renee did to my family. I told him the whole story again. When I finished, Harvey let out a long breath. He said his wife left him 3 years ago and their son calling Renee Mama was part of why. He said they thought something was wrong with their son. They took him to doctors and therapists trying to figure out why he would not bond with his own mother. His wife blamed herself and fell into a depression. Then Renee left for another job, and within 3 weeks, their son started calling his mother Mama again. Harvey said that was when they realized what had been happening. But by then the damage was done and his wife could not forgive him for not seeing it sooner. I asked why he was still on Renee's reference list. He said his ex-wife wanted to report Renee to some kind of nanny agency, but he just wanted to move on. He said he had been giving neutral references for the past 3 years, hoping no one would actually call. I thanked Harvey and ended the call. My hands shook as I wrote down the name he gave me. Judy Larson. Another mother who went through the same thing. Another family Renee damaged. I waited until the next morning to call because I did not want to sound too desperate. I dialed the number at 9 o'clock after I dropped Olive at her current babysitter. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. A woman answered and I asked if this was Judy Larson. She said yes, and I took a breath. I told her my name and said I was calling about Renee, who used to work as her nanny. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard a sound like crying. Judy asked how I got her number and I said Harvey Sanderson gave it to me. She cried harder. She said she thought she was the only one. She said she thought something was wrong with her as a mother. I told her she was not alone, and that Renee did the same thing to my family. Judy kept crying and I waited. She finally said she needed to hear this because she spent years thinking she was crazy or broken or just not good enough. I asked if we could talk about what happened. Judy took a shaky breath and started telling me her story. She said her daughter was 8 now and still sometimes slipped and called her by her first name when she was tired or upset. She said Renee worked for them for 2 years, and by the end her daughter would run past Judy to get to Renee every single day. She said she spent thousands on therapy trying to figure out what she did wrong. She said the therapist kept asking about her relationship with her own mother and whether she felt confident in her parenting. She said she started believing maybe she was not meant to be a mother because her daughter clearly preferred someone else. She said when Renee finally left for another job, her daughter cried for weeks. Then slowly things changed. Her daughter started coming to her for comfort again, started calling her mom again, started choosing her over other people. Judy said that was when she realized it was not her fault. It was what Renee had been doing the whole time. I asked Judy if she would be willing to warn Deborah with me. I told her about the new family Renee was working for and how the mother did not believe me when I tried to tell her. Judy went quiet. Then she said no. She said she could not relive that time period. She said her husband made her promise to stop talking about Renee years ago because it was making her depressed and angry. She said I should let it go too. She said Renee was like a black hole that swallows up your peace and I would never get closure or justice. She said the best thing I could do was move on and be grateful I only lost a year instead of 2 or 3 or more. I thanked Judy and we hung up. I sat in my car outside the babysitter's house and thought about how many mothers Renee had damaged and silenced over 15 years. How many of us were out there thinking we were alone, thinking we were bad mothers, thinking our children did not love us because of something we did wrong. I drove home and tried to focus on work, but I could not stop thinking about Deborah and her baby. 2 weeks went by. I checked my phone constantly waiting for some kind of update. Then one afternoon, Deborah called me. She was crying. She said she started noticing small things. She said Renee would redirect the baby's attention away from her when she came home from work. She said Renee talked about mama this and mama that even though the baby was too young to even understand words yet. She said her husband thought she was being paranoid. She said he told her she was looking for problems because some stranger on the phone scared her. But Deborah said she could not shake the feeling that I was telling the truth. She asked if we could meet. I suggested the park near her house. I told her to bring the baby and I would bring Olive. I wanted Deborah to see Renee with her own eyes and make her own decision. We met on a Saturday morning. The park was crowded with families. I spotted Renee immediately. She was pushing a stroller near the swings. Deborah's baby was inside bundled in a pink blanket. Deborah stood next to me holding a coffee cup. We watched from a distance. Renee took the baby out of the stroller and put her in a baby swing. She pushed gently and talked to the baby. From where we stood, I could not hear what she was saying. Olive was playing on the slide nearby. She went down once, then climbed back up. Then she stopped. She stood at the top of the slide and stared across the playground. I followed her gaze. She was looking at Renee. I held my breath. I did not know what would happen. Would Olive run over? Would she call out for Mama Renee? Would all that work I did to rebuild our bond fall apart right here in this park? Olive stared at Renee for a long moment. Renee did not notice. She was focused on the baby in the swing. Then Olive climbed down from the slide and walked back to me. She tugged on my jacket. She asked if that was the lady who used to play with her. I said yes. Olive looked back at Renee one more time. Then she shrugged. She said okay, and went back to the slide. I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. Renee did not have power over her anymore. My daughter knew who her mother was. Deborah watched the whole thing. She looked at me and I could see she understood now. That night after Olive was in bed, I sat with my husband in the living room. I told him I wanted to write about what happened. I wanted to post it in the local parenting groups, so other mothers would know to watch for these warning signs. My husband put down his phone. He said I should do what I needed to do. But he warned me it might get messy if Renee found out. He said she might try to sue me or come after me somehow. I said I did not care. I said I was done hiding and being quiet about what she did. I spent the next 3 days writing and rewriting my story. I tried to be fair but honest about what Renee did to multiple families. I included specific examples of the manipulation tactics. I wrote about how she taught Olive to call her mama and me by my first name. I wrote about Harvey's son and Judy's daughter. I wrote about the warning signs to watch for, like redirecting children's attention away from parents and using mama as a title for herself. I wrote advice about checking references thoroughly and trusting your gut when something feels wrong. When I finished, I posted it in 5 different parenting forums using my real name. I was done hiding. My post got shared hundreds of times in the first week. My inbox filled up with messages from other mothers thanking me for speaking up. Some said they had similar experiences with different nannies. Some said they almost hired Renee but decided not to after reading my post. 3 more families reached out privately. They said they had similar experiences with Renee but were too ashamed to talk about it before. They thought they were bad mothers. They thought no one would believe them. One woman said her son still had attachment issues at age 10 because of what Renee did when he was a toddler. Deborah messaged me 4 days after I posted. She said she fired Renee that morning. She said she caught Renee teaching her baby to reach for her instead of Deborah during fussy times. She said when the baby cried, Renee would pick her up immediately and turn away, so Deborah could not see the baby's face. She said she watched through a crack in the door one afternoon and saw Renee holding the baby close and whispering "Mama's here" over and over. Deborah said she felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, but she was grateful she only lost a few weeks instead of years like I did. 2 weeks after I posted my story, I got an email from a woman named Sarah who lived in the town next to mine. She said Renee had applied to work for her family, and she found my post while doing a background check. Sarah thanked me for sharing what happened because she almost hired Renee before reading my warning. She said the references all sounded great and Renee seemed perfect during the interview. But after reading my post, she noticed some red flags in how Renee talked about previous families. Sarah said she asked Renee why she left my family, and Renee claimed I was jealous and unstable. That made Sarah even more suspicious because it matched exactly what I described in my post about Renee rewriting the narrative. 3 days later, another mother named Michelle reached out from a different town. She said the same thing happened with her. Renee applied for a nanny position, and Michelle found my post during her research. Michelle said she reported Renee to a nanny registry database that tracks complaints and concerns about childcare workers. She included screenshots of my post and the other comments from mothers who had similar experiences. Michelle said she hoped it would help protect other families even if Renee moved to a new area. I sat at my kitchen table reading these messages and felt something shift inside me. Maybe sharing my story actually mattered. Maybe speaking up helped prevent other mothers from losing time with their babies the way I lost time with Olive. My husband came home and found me crying at the table with my laptop open. He asked what was wrong and I showed him the emails. He read them quietly, then pulled me into a hug. He said he was proud of me for being brave enough to tell the truth even when it was hard. A week later, an envelope arrived at my house with a law firm's return address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter from a lawyer representing Renee. The letter said I was sued for defamation, and that my online posts contained false and damaging statements about Renee's professional reputation. The letter demanded I remove all posts immediately and pay $20,000 in damages or face a lawsuit. I called my husband at work and could barely get the words out. He came home early and we sat together reading the letter over and over. That night we had dinner with his cousin who works as a lawyer in family law. I brought the letter and explained everything that happened with Renee. My husband's cousin read the letter carefully, then looked up at me. She said truth is a complete defense against defamation, and I had multiple witnesses who could verify what Renee did. She said Renee's lawyer was probably trying to scare me into silence, but they would have a hard time winning in court. She offered to write a response letter for free explaining why the lawsuit had no merit. 2 months went by and nothing happened. Renee never filed the actual lawsuit. Then Deborah called me one afternoon and said she heard through another mother that Renee moved to a different state. Deborah said word got around in our local parenting community about what Renee did and no one would hire her anymore. She said Renee probably left to start fresh somewhere else where people did not know her history. I still think about Renee sometimes and wonder what drove her to do what she did. Part of me wonders if she genuinely loved the children she cared for, or if it was always about power and control. Did she really believe she was helping by becoming their primary attachment figure, or did she know exactly what she was taking from us mothers? My therapist says it can be both things at once. She says Renee might have truly cared about the children while also needing to be the most important person in their lives. My therapist says that does not make what Renee did any less wrong, even if her feelings were real. I am slowly learning to accept that I may never fully understand what motivated Renee, or why she thought it was okay to steal something so precious from multiple mothers. Some questions do not have answers that make sense. Olive is 3 now and doing great. She calls me Mama without any pause or confusion. Sometimes when we are playing, she mentions the lady who used to watch her before her current babysitter. She does not remember Renee's name anymore, and she does not ask about her. Olive just knows there was someone else before, and now there is someone new. Our current babysitter is wonderful and respectful of boundaries. She encourages Olive to talk about Mama and Dada, and makes sure Olive knows who her parents are. I learned to be more careful about who I trust with my daughter. I learned to speak up immediately when something feels wrong instead of waiting and hoping it will get better on its own. I learned that protecting my family sometimes means being uncomfortable and standing up for what is right even when other people think I am overreacting. Our family healed and grew stronger through this whole experience, and I am genuinely happy with where we are now.